Jump points in Star Citizen are about to change everything. I'm joined by SpaceCoder, a director at Atlas Defense Industries, to discuss how these gateways will reshape gameplay from security risks to strategic opportunities that will redefine how we play the game. As head of ADI's Contract Support Services Division, SpaceCoder has a unique perspective on the challenges and strategies players will need to navigate as jump points are introduced. Let's dive into how this game-changing feature will impact the Star Citizen universe. So SpaceCoder, tell me how you think jump points are going to impact Star Citizen, since we're going to see them right around the corner.
Well, so Star Citizen has been one system for pretty much the entire time it has existed. And now we're adding a whole separate system, and it's sort of a counterpoint to Stanton. And then we're linking it with jump points, and there are some interesting developments there, in my opinion. Number one is that jump points are not one-to-one entry to exit. So you're not always entering and exiting at the same place, which is actually a very good strategy on the side of CIG to avoid traffic congestion, trying to push things both ways out of a jump point. And at the same time, as they actually mentioned in ISC, I believe, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, at the time of recording of this, it also adds a sort of passive security layer for people who are arriving from Stanton to Pyro or vice versa. So it's actually more difficult to attack someone as they're vulnerable and exiting the system. And that's actually how we get to the impact of this, is that the expectation is that a lot of people are going to move away from Stanton and sort of engage in that lawless, less controlled gameplay in Pyro.
Well, I mean, as I looked at it, my big concern is there's these rallying points. I foresee, particularly on the waiting to go into the jump point, being a big security risk, that you're going to have griefers and pirates try to target you and try to disrupt, as because your shields are going to have to be down for this so that the quantum drive can spool up.
You're going to have.
Go ahead,
well, CAG are kind of doing two things there. One's going to be active security, which is just going to be station turrets on there, which are going to be terrible, as they are everywhere right now.
They might as well not be there.
They might as well not be there. I don't get it. We can do it. We can hit anything, moving at anything in real life. Why can't CIG do it in a video game? Come on, guys.
Well, I mean, again, he's got that Memphis Belle picture in his head of the turret gunners not being able to hit the broadside of a barn out of the B-17 at the little fighters.
I'm just saying, I'm not very good at math, and I could probably do it.
I agree. But then there's also going to be could build something to shoot accurately. Yes.
Well, my master's thesis was shooting things down, so I can definitely build it.
For sure.
But there's also going to be the passive layer of security on there, where in addition to the controlled jump points, we're going to have uncontrolled ones, where you can just find it and it leads somewhere. So the obvious implication being, if you only have Pyro and Stanton, if you find a random jump point in Stanton, it probably goes to Pyro.
Well,
that's not going
initially.
to be. At least initially.
That might change.
That might change. It might not be true, but it does add that layer of security. So technically, you could avoid that waiting line. How useful is that going to be remains to be seen, because we don't know how long these transient jump points are going to be alive for. Is it going to be one jump? Is it going to be an hour? Is it going to be a couple days? Are they going to be big enough? Because they said that there's going to be size limitations on these. So, if you want to move a large fleet through a transient jump point,
you might
not all those ships might fit. Yeah. So you might actually have to throw up security at the jump gate you're going to be using if you're going to be moving a large amount of ships. And that gives your opponents a chance to, we're going to post a scout there. And if someone shows up with 100 ships, we're going to warn everybody.
Well, yeah, and I think the other thing is, we both are in a large org with a lot of people. I see us having to probably split the jumps a little bit, in that you're going to have, your military, you're going to put a unit in front of you that goes and secures the other end of the jump point that you're wanting to transverse. Then you're going to have to protect the miners or the cargo ships or whatever, get them through to that and rendezvous with that security. And then finally your last tail end security element's going to have to transition, and the regroup on the far side is not going to be easy. It's going to be time consuming and a pain in the butt.
Yeah,
And
especially for Pyro, where
yeah,
basically the exit is it's in a gas cloud. You can't see anything. There's disruption. Also, by design, the exit does separate ships quite a lot
yep, by a
to
wide
prevent
margin.
collisions. So we saw that with the jump point playtests, where people would be just exiting all over the place. Whether that was intentional, I think it was, because colliding into things at the other end of the jump points would be
Would
not
be no
fun.
fun. Yep.
Yeah,
And I see griefers trying to collide with you inside the jump
yeah.
points. How do you think CIG can address potential security concerns with these jump points that we've laid out?
Well, there's a couple things they could do, ranging from easy and stupid and difficult and making sense. Easy and stupid, hard armistice. You are not gonna fire a ship weapon in there, just
Yeah, I
the
don't
entry and
see them
exit
doing
point.
that.
And I don't see them doing that. Not in the long term, maybe in the short term they will do it, but we don't actually have hard armistice around stations anymore. You can fire your weapons. So
Yep.
I don't think they're gonna bring that back specifically for the gateways.
I could see on some of the safe gateways them having the soft armistice that if you shoot somebody inside of it, you get crime statted immediately.
Yeah, I think that's what we should expect, at least for the sort of
Safe
UE
side.
side of things. So
Yep.
Stanton, Terra, that kind of stuff. On Pyro side, stations do sort of have armistice, but that's kind of the the local gang not wanting people to cause trouble. So
Yeah.
you're rather than risking crimes, that you're risking losing reputation with them.
I-
And CAG did say that the gateway station in Pyro is safe or safer than the rest of the system. So maybe there's going to be something like that. And that kind of brings us to what should the actual solution be. And that's going to be very much a presence of security. So there should be NPC ships in there constantly, turrets that actually hit things. Basically, my idea is that if you fire at someone intentionally, like you want to do harm at someone waiting in line for jump point, you should be immediately obliterated. You should
yeah, I
not be
don't see
alive
that
for more than
happening.
5 seconds if you do
Yeah,
that.
but we both know that's not going to be the case.
Well,
Um,
CAG love their emergent gameplay, i.e., griefing.
yes, yeah.
So,
There's definitely some salty pirates over there at CIG that just have no problem with creating drama in their game design.
well,
So,
if once it starts affecting funding and player count, I think we will see a change.
yep, I completely agree with you. So, how do you think jump points will affect player interactions in strategic planning? Because I see that as a big issue as we move forward into this.
I agree. I think it's gonna be a big issue that a lot of small and medium-sized groups and orgs don't see. That this is a big logistical problem because of what we talked about in a minute ago, where the exit is scattered and you have to provide your own security on entry. And I think a lot of people are forgetting that this is going to have to happen somehow. And then if we talk about Pyro specifically, then there is no logistics. So you're going to have to set up your own supply chain if you're going to do any extended kind of operations. Because if you're, let's say, a lawful faction, let's say,
Hmm.
you're not a pirate faction, you're probably not going to have a very good reputation with the gangs that control Pyro. So they're
Probably not.
probably not going to sell you fuel. And there is only very few, I think they said it's 2 or 3 stations in Pyro that are not affiliated with any gang and that might sell you fuel. But again, it's an
Might.
unlawful faction outside of UEE, so the assumption is you're not going to have a very good reputation with those guys either. So, uh, yeah, it's going to be a big logistical challenge. Starfarers are going to be a big thing if CIG fix them because they don't work right now.
Knock on
Uh,
wood.
Knock on wood. There is obviously the hope that they might bring in other resupply assets. I think now would be kind of a good time to put the Vulcan into production, in my opinion, because
Yes, it'd be nice to see the Vulcan.
yes, it would be a good idea, but it's not going to happen.
Nope,
But
not
in the
anytime soon.
meantime, I think CIG should just be like, well, let's take a ship that has a bunch of variants and make a refueling variant. like make like a Connie whatever that has a bunch of fuel tanks and a boom arm on it,
Maybe.
and call it a day. I think that's gonna be like a week of a designer's time to get that done. You know, slap a price tag like $150 on it and put it out on the store.
Don't give them ideas like that. Um, so
No,
follow up to
that's why they
that.
watch my videos.
Yes, follow up to that. Do you anticipate more conflicts or cooperation between players as a result of these jump points?
I think it's gonna be shoot on sight kind of a situation,
Really?
yeah, and CAG have very much shown that that's what they are aiming for, especially with Pyro. I mean, the whole contested zones is just, oh, we added, so we stole dark zones from Destiny and we put them on Pyro stations, and that's kind of their whole gameplay there. And I think here's kind of a psychological thing, I suppose. People assume that people are going to go to Pyro to fight, except everyone in Pyro is going to be ready for a fight.
Yeah.
And fighting someone who is ready for a fight is not fun because
I
they're going to defend themselves.
I think all the griefers and pirates and narrowly wells are going to live in Pyro, and
And just
anywhere
journey
near
into
that
Stanton to ruin people's days.
and anywhere near that Stanton jump point is going to be a high risk environment because they're going to slip through and try to wreak havoc and then slip back into
Exactly.
Pyro. I mean, you're going to see some fighting in Pyro without a doubt, but I think your biggest, everybody's going to know, hey, if I go to Pyro, I've got to go heavy and I've got to go with
Yeah.
extra people and all of that stuff. But they're not going to necessarily think, oh, if I'm out near that station doing a cargo run, that I'm at a huge risk of getting griefed, because that's what I would do if I was a bad guy. I'd, have a cargo hauler like a C2 nearby, go hit people there, and then run it back through the jump gate
Yeah.
as quick as I could.
I actually expect that some areas of Pyro will be very quiet
Yes,
because
but
there's nothing there. So there's going to be a bunch of people doing missions and deliveries and mining and stuff. So I think one way to survive in Pyro is going to be go in hard and heavy with a lot of people, or try to keep a low profile and not be found.
but
And we will see which side wins this.
I think you go in hard and heavy potentially, and then set up shop someplace out of the way for a few hours,
Possible,
and
possible.
then hard and heavy back out.
Yeah,
Because here's the thing, my experience is pirate and griefer groups are really good at picking on a handful of 2 or 3 or 4 ships. They're not really gonna be prepared for, oh crap, an Idris, 8 fighters and some medium support
yeah,
combat ships. They're not going to be able to win that fight 7 times out of 10, 8 times out of 10.
yeah. I mean,
And
it has happened to us on ops where we were attacked, but we had cap set up, we had air defense set up, we had the numbers, and overwhelming majority of the cases where we won.
yeah, I mean, if you go in heavy, it's hard to defeat a organized group.
Yep.
And so, I think to a certain extent, I see Pyro as this big place where we can go do things that other groups can't. We talk about, oh, well, we've got to go farm FS9s for our Marine teams. But if we can go buy them in Pyro, we'll just go buy them in Pyro in
Yep.
force.
Yep.
And, you'll
There's
slip
some
in.
talk that like the shops that sell them might be reputation locked. So that might be an interesting sort of
Well,
counter situation. But
sure.
it's not here yet. It's gonna come in end of the year, more likely early next year, if we're being realistic.
But even if they are reputation locked, we'll have some guys in the org that have that reputation because they're over there playing,
Yeah.
have them buy them and then transfer them to crates on a different ship.
Well, yeah, that's what deniable ops are for.
Yes. So that comes to my follow-up question. How might organizations like ADI, the large organizations, leverage jump points for strategic advantages? Do you see an opportunity for large orgs to take advantage of the upcoming jump points?
Well, I think there's gonna be some business to be found in providing security for people trying to pass through, but not having the numbers to secure the entry and exit. But I consider that to be sort of a lowly market for ADI. I think that's going to be your medium-sized mercenary orgs that only do protection.
Um, I see large orgs being able to push through large fleets and be able to protect their ships as they're moving through. Um, do you see any other ways that a large org like ADI would be able to um, leverage jump points to make an advantage?
Well, I mean, we could certainly blockade a jump point if we wanted to. Even with how wide the area of the exit point is, uh, technically we do have the numbers to patrol that area
Yep.
and check everyone coming in. And even if we did not have the ability to patrol it, we got the Nautilus coming in at some point in the future. Just
Oh yeah,
lay a whole ton of mines in there. And
that would
if
mess
they get
people's
through,
days
we
up.
will know where they are because there's going to be a trail of explosions going behind them. So uh, definitely, having that amount of resources and manpower available to control these areas is going to be, if not in itself a strategic leverage, it's going to be a stepping stone to a strategic leverage, in my opinion.
I agree. So as we look at those security risks and, you know, how are other players, or small groups going to be able to mitigate these risks? Or are they going to be able to mitigate these risks that we're highlighting?
Well, smaller groups can actually leverage being small, in my opinion, because a small number of people they can slip through.
Yeah,
If
but if they
they
get hit, they're done. They don't
But if
have
they
any
get so
debt.
that they have to be very careful. It's a very high risk activity for them.
Yep,
But maybe they can find a transient jump point that will last long enough and goes where they need to go, and they
sure.
can sort of leverage kind of pre-mission scouting to do this, or they really have to be good at evading after they get in there or evading on their way to the entry. It will certainly be interesting to see what small groups do. They could actually even at least while we have multiple servers, server hop and find a server where no
That's
one's locking down.
empty and slip in and then log
Yeah,
out and go into a more popular server.
yeah. So they could actually sort of use this meta game approach to it. Or, let's say the jump point, entry point is locked down. They're not letting through groups of players. Just don't go as a group. Just go every couple hours, one guy, two guys. Just try to blend in with everybody else. Be
Potentially.
sneaky about it.
Yep.
Uh, But we'll see. I'm very interested to see what people do. Obviously, they could try to punch through, and they could succeed if they, have the element of surprise and they sort of manage to catch the defender off their foot. But we'll see. It's going to be very interesting, I think.
What role might security and escort missions play in jump point travel? Do you foresee us seeing missions in game that are escort something through a jump point or escort something from Stanton to somewhere in Pyro?
As a mission,
Yeah.
probably not in the near future because the mission system doesn't support this kind of thing, at least as far as I know. In the future, uh, definitely. But I think CAG will have to come up with some way of transiting a jump point as a sort of locked in group so it doesn't throw you around. So you jump as sort of information, let's call it.
Yep.
Because what could happen to you, but on the other hand, that might sort of be the feature of the mission is that you exit and you are a couple hundred
Spread
kilometers
out.
away from
Yep.
what you're protecting, and it's vulnerable now. Uh,
Well,
it's a
and
balancing act.
and I think that there's a real question in, now while there may not be missions per se, like in-game missions, I think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for escort duties.
Oh
Um,
yes, as
a
a
lot.
emergent player-driven
Yep.
activity, yes.
Yep. So
Because
I think that's
there's
coming.
going to be someone wanting to transport something one way or another.
And have some security.
Yeah, I mean, during the Pyro playtest, we saw water bottles being extremely valuable in Pyro.
Yes.
because there is no clean water. So I definitely see someone just loading up a whole sea with water bottles and just transiting that to ruin station.
I think you're going to be able to do a smaller ship than a whole C. I think you're going to want to run, I don't know, a C1 or an
Probably
MSR
a
or
C1
something.
or an MSR.
How do you think the Pyro Stanton jump point will influence player behavior? In particular, what's economic opportunities do you foresee with this new connection?
Well, on one hand, you have Pyro, where since it's a lawless area, you're gonna have a lot of high demand illegal goods. So you're gonna have drugs, you're gonna have weapons on there in high quantities. But on the other hand, it's a place where that civilian infrastructure doesn't exist. It's not really maintained. So stuff like food, medical supplies, water, basic resources are gonna be in high demand. So I think there's gonna be a big pull of resources from Stanton to Pyro where, oh, I can just grab some water and some food that's like actual food, not grilled rats, and I can fly that over to Pyro, and people are just gonna tear themselves over it because it's actual food. Like
Well,
I,
and I agree. I think you're going to have clean food being flown in, and
yeah,
you're going to be having weapons that are readily available being flown out.
yeah.
Day one, that's what I think the trade is going to be.
I mean, if you were at the Pyro stations during the playtest, every single NPC on there would kill for a bag of chips. Every single one of them.
Really.
Oh yes. They had that look on their face for like I need some chips
Just
like
some
right
chips,
now.
just some water, just some water where that isn't irradiated.
Yeah,
So I
radiation is
think,
good for you. Makes
yeah,
you
and
glow.
makes you glow. Not in a good way. So, I guess my question is, my final question on this topic is, um, how is Pyro going to affect resource distribution and trade dynamics? I mean, in the big picture, as it's the first star system we're going to be linked to, how do you see it impacting resources and trade?
Well, we really have to see what CAG do with prices and sort of the demand and production of resources. Because right now, production of commodities is fairly low around Stanton, especially if you take into account that every single outpost is a singular inventory. So no matter how many servers you have, it's still the same number.
Yep.
That's how much resources is in there. Uh, and then, is there a place in Pyro that can produce some of these things? So there might be a small farm, because they have some unaffiliated outposts out there, and they might be producing food that might be, locally sourced, maybe at a higher price than Stanton, but still fetching a pretty good profit. So it really depends on what CAG put where at what price and what quantity. And that might actually, drive uh, conflicts over control on these locations because, oh, here's an outpost in Pyro that produces clean water. Might actually be worthwhile controlling that. And you kind of get this jump down kind of situation, but over, basic
Water
resources.
instead of drugs.
Yeah. Well, finally, drug lords doing something good for, the people kind of a situation.
Sure. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
I think that you're going to have a huge, as I said, a huge weapons trade coming out of Pyro into Stanton. The fact that in the playtest we've been able to buy LMGs
Oh
and
yeah.
sniper rifles and
Just off the shelf.
off the shelf. I see orgs in particular who like to equip their shooters with that stuff, flying in an MSR or something,
Yeah.
stacking a 16 SCU crate full of weapons and flying it out so they have them.
Yeah. Yeah,
So I
that definitely could be a possibility. And I think it actually creates a lot of opportunity for smuggling because some of this stuff you're gonna bring out is illegal in Stanton. So you're gonna have to evade sort of the corporate security UEE,
sure.
and that brings in your smuggling gameplay. At the same time, if you're bringing in something that's sort of medical supplies, food, water, the outlaw factions, they might just let you do it because they need their people to stay alive. So there is also that element of self-preservation for them, where yeah, you know what, it's not us, and we're gonna tax the shit out of this person, but we're not gonna try to kill them over this.
Well, yeah, and I think even as an org, you're gonna want to pre-stage medical and food and
Oh yeah,
water there for ops, and so I see a big need to fly stuff in. Now we're gonna have to. I don't think in the initial patch, and probably not for a number of patches, I don't think that they're going to spoil stuff that you fly in. I think if you fly it in, it stays good forever,
yeah,
at least for the foreseeable future.
yeah,
And so, I think that's going to be a huge advantage to groups that can have the logistics trained to
yeah,
pull
definitely.
weapons and armor and all of that stuff and get it into semi-safe areas. Um, I think the real question is, do you think in Pyro we're going to have instanced hangars, and are we going to be able to safely move around in those hangars, or are we going to constantly be at a risk of being in a firefight?
Well, from what I understood from the recent ISCs and what CAG have talked about, yes, there's going to be instance hangars.
So, how do you think the introduction of Pyro is going to impact distribution and trade dynamics?
Well, it really depends on what commodities CAG make available in Pyro. Uh, because, like we said before, there's going to be a demand for food, water, medical supplies in Pyro because that's stuff that cannot be manufactured in a large quantity. But perhaps there's going to be one or two locations that can do it in a large enough quantity, and that's going to spark some conflict of control on these locations. But then there's also going to be a lot of opportunistic and brave traders who are going to buy this stuff in Stanton and deliver it to Pyro and then bring back, guns or drugs or other contraband that might be in demand in Stanton, but is not manufactured or not available, especially for drugs and guns. Because, the drug labs in Stanton, one outside of Jumptown, their production is fairly
Very, very
low,
low. Yep,
and there is a lot of combat happening there.
I agree completely.
Yeah,
A lot. So, and I think you're exactly right. I think you're going to see a lot of medium-sized traders and C1s, MSRs,
yeah.
Corsairs that are running water and food into Pyro and coming back with weapons that you can buy there off the shelf and drugs you can buy there off the shelf.
The interesting bit might be that their profit margin might actually be enough to get escorts or get gunners and sort of be more armed. That would be
Yep.
very interesting to see because you don't really see that in Stanton. People just kind of run it and take the loss if they lose the ship and the cargo. Uh, but we will see. Really depends on what CAG do with it.
And I think there's going to be a big trade in, I think there's going to be a lot of mining opportunities and things of that nature that are there in Pyro with the asteroids and things of that nature that they have.
Yeah,
And I think you're going to see large orgs go in, push in and set up to operate out in space for, and then run ships back with the
yeah,
unrefined stuff.
yeah. Or
And
once we get refineries, even just set up a refinery in there and
yep,
try to work with that
definitely.
because that
So
really cuts down your volume.
I agree completely. So, on your final thoughts as we look at these jump points and their expected introduction later this year, is there what's your general takeaway for players? Anything that we didn't discuss that you think everybody should be aware of?
I think what people need to remember or be aware of is that jump points are going to be a driver of conflict. You are going to get jumped on both ends. There's going to be people trying to deny access on both ends, and they're going to succeed because it takes a manpower advantage and ship advantage to dislodge a defender around that location. Uh, so either people are going to have to organize, which they rarely do, to defend these locations or take them back and enable travel. And I think the expectation that Stanton will become safer because Pyro is going to exist is not true.
No.
I think it's actually going to get worse.
Well, no, I think, you know, my argument would be anywhere near the pyro jump point is going to get a lot worse. I
Oh,
like
yes.
orders of magnitude worse. Um, you know, other parts of Stanton, I think might calm down some, you
We'll
know,
see. I think it also depends on whether they will do transient jump points straight away or if that's going to be something that's going to come later on. Uh, really depends on that.
you're right. But I mean, again, I don't foresee, you know, I know right now, if you're a soloer and you're flying down into a junkyard to sell, you're taking your life into your own hands.
Yeah.
You're more likely than not to get whacked. I don't necessarily know that's going to be the case um, when the jump town, or I mean, excuse me, the jump point's open, and you know the guys are focused. They're living out of pyro
Yeah.
because I think they're going to crank up the security in Stanton. I think that's the big reason why they're picking Pyro is so they can crank up the security in Stanton
That
and
would be
make it.
interesting to see, definitely.
Yeah,
Also, the other thing is, uh, Pyro is a pretty big place.
it's
It,
huge,
it
much
is
bigger
much
than
bigger than
Stanton.
Stanton. So I think you're going to have sort of high intensity areas in Pyro, but you're also going to have places where you're not going to see another player.
Oh, I completely agree. I think you may be in a situation where, you know, you could go out and in small scale stuff and not see anybody for a day or more playing.
Because that was the case during the Pyro playtest, that you could actually go to some marked areas, marked settlements, and you
Wouldn't
wouldn't
see a
meet
single
anyone.
person. Yeah,
You would
completely agree.
see sort of the detritus of people being there. You know, you would be corpses, shot down ship, that kind of stuff, but you wouldn't see players. And generally, you would have quite a lot of warning. And oftentimes, at least in my experience, was that if I was somewhere and someone was coming in, I would leave immediately and they would let me leave. Or if I was arriving and someone was already there, they would leave and I would let them leave. Because yes, you are strapped and you're ready for a fight, but if you can avoid a fight, you're gonna avoid the fight.
Sounds great.
Because yeah,
No, I agree completely. So with that said, before we run into any more technical issues, we're gonna sign off on this one. You're gonna be back in short order, talking about some other stuff with us, and I really appreciate you being here for the inaugural version of J Talking on Hangar Ready.
it had to be
So,
me.
you want to give a shout out to your website there and tell people how they can get to the armory?
Absolutely. So two things I want to shout out about myself. Number one, my YouTube channel, which I'm assuming is going to be linked somewhere around this, where I do essentially what we're doing here, just on a more digestible format. And there's pictures of ships instead of my face, which I think is much more pleasant to the eye. Uh, and second, the armory. The armory lets you look up stats on your character's equipment, especially damage on weapons, reduction, and temperature resistances on armor. And most importantly, it tells you where to buy it and where to loot it. And you can also submit information on.
Yep. Well, thank you very much, Space.
Yeah,
Really enjoy
absolutely.
having you on, and
It's
hopefully
been fun.
everybody found this conversation interesting.
And we'll
Uh,
be back when my camera cools down.
yes, take it easy.
Thank you.
If you're finding this conversation interesting, we've got more tutorials and interviews you won't want to miss. Whether it's mastering gameplay strategies or diving deeper into the mechanics of Star Citizen, there's plenty more ahead. Be sure to check out our next interview or one of our in-depth tutorials.